You spend your whole life training for one moment, one shot. They teach you to control your breath, to slow your heart, to become a ghost, a whisper on the wind. They drill into you the mechanics, the ballistics, the windage, the breathing. You can field strip your rifle in the dark. Your fingers know every contour and edge like they know your own heartbeat. You become a master of the instrument, a technician of distance and force. But what they never teach you, what no one can prepare you for, is what comes after. There's no manual for the weight that settles in your soul. No training exercise for the guilt that creeps in during the silence of your own mind. Long after the battlefield goes quiet, they prepare you for the act but never the consequence. My name is Elias Shaw, call sign Watchman, 3rd Marine Recon Battalion, Vietnam, year 1968. My job was simple on paper. Observation, be a shadow, eyes where others couldn't go. Drift through the jungle, watch, listen, report. See without being seen. I was good at it, too good. Confidence turned to arrogance. And arrogance, it'll betray you when you least expect it. On a ridge above the A Shao Valley, I spotted him. Through the scope of my M40, the world narrowed to a single perfect frame. Inside it, an officer, a high-value target. My finger settled on the trigger. One clean shot. And in that moment, I believed it would change everything. The crack of the rifle tore the silence apart. It didn't echo. It was swallowed by the jungle as if the trees themselves were keeping secrets. And then came the silence. Thick, heavy, unnatural. Not the silence of peace. The silence of something waiting. That one shot, the one I thought was my masterpiece, wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The starter's pistol for hell itself. Within minutes, the jungle erupted. Muzzle flashes cut through the green. Mortar fire cracked overhead. The valley became a cauldron, and my platoon, those men I swore to protect, walked straight into it. And the truth hit me with more force than any recoil. It wasn't random. They were waiting because of me. Let me take you back step by step so you understand how arrogance kills. It was the so-called dry season, but don't let the name fool you. The air clung to your lungs like wet cloth. The heat pressed down on your shoulders made every breath feel like work. We'd been inserted 2 days before, a standard 4-man team. Myself, Elias Shaw, the sniper, my spotter, Corporal David Jenkins, a steady Ohio farm boy with a wife and newborn daughter, her photo tucked inside a plastic sleeve, and 2 radiomen, Miller and Vargas, barely 19. Kids, eager eyes, nervous smiles. Our mission couldn't have been clearer. Watch, report, call in artillery if needed. Do not engage. We were ghosts. Our weapon was information. For 48 hours, we were perfect. No noise, no mistakes. We became part of the ridge. We ate cold rations. We whispered with hand signals. We watched the convoys below, trucks draped in camouflage, slithering like snakes down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We logged everything. Directions, numbers, timings. We were invisible and we were effective. Then came the 3rd morning. Mist still clung to the treetops. Light filtered soft through the canopy. Jenkins nudged me, passing the scope. 2 o'clock, near the rubber tree, white pajamas. And there he was, an NVA officer. Not just any officer, you could see it in his posture. Crisp uniform, commanding presence. Soldiers around him hung on his every word. He was pointing at a map, issuing orders. Even clean-shaven, a luxury in the jungle. That meant status, privilege, importance. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but a cold thrill. This was it, the kind of target you'd dream about. 620 meters, slight uphill angle, mild crosswind. 3 knots left to right. I could make that shot blindfolded. Jenkins felt it too, but his instincts pulled the other way. His whisper was urgent. Watchman, orders are clear. No engagement. Eyes only. Copy. His eyes locked on mine, pleading. I heard him, but I didn't listen. My certainty drowned out reason. All I saw was the opportunity, the kill that could ripple through the enemy's ranks, maybe save lives later. I told myself I wasn't breaking orders, I was interpreting them. Intelligently. Proactive. A Marine doing his job. Jenkins, I whispered back, cheek pressed to the stock, finger brushing the trigger. This is a golden opportunity. We take him out. We cripple their command structure. We save lives. He shook his head, eyes sharp, voice taut. You'll bring the hornet's nest on all of us. Don't but arrogance, it whispers louder than wisdom. I exhaled, squeezed. The officer dropped instantly, a clean shot. Perfect. My chest swelled with pride for half a heartbeat. And then the jungle came alive. Within seconds, NVA troops swarmed, fanning out, rifles raised. They weren't confused, they weren't panicked, they were ready. My bullet hadn't removed a leader, it had set off an alarm. And as my platoon advanced into that valley, the truth hit me harder than the recoil. My one shot hadn't won us an advantage. My one shot doomed an entire platoon. The chaos unfolded like a nightmare. Mortars fell, trees shattered, dirt and fire erupted all around. I scrambled back, dragging Jenkins with me as rounds chewed the earth where we'd been. Radio static screamed in my ear. Miller trying to raise command, Vargas shouting coordinates, his voice cracking under fire. "Shut it down!" Jenkins yelled, clutching my arm. His eyes weren't angry, they were terrified. For us, for them, for everyone walking into the meat grinder below. We tried to call it in, tried to warn them, but the signal was jammed, cut off by the NVA who knew exactly where we were. That's when I realized this wasn't coincidence. That officer, he was bait. A sacrificial pawn left in plain sight, waiting for some arrogant sniper to take the shot. Waiting for me. The NVA had been watching us. Patient. Silent. They let us sit on that ridge, logging their movements, thinking we were clever. And then, when the moment came, they turned our own pride into their weapon. Down below, the platoon moved deeper into the valley. I could see them, 30 Marines, spread in staggered formation, rifles raised, helmets glinting in patches of sunlight. They had no idea that death waited in the tree line, rifles leveled, mortars sighted. I shouted into the radio until my throat bled, "Abort! Abort! It's a trap!" But all I got back was static, and then it began. The first explosion ripped the earth apart. Marines scattered, some cut down before they even had a chance to react. The air filled with screams and gunfire, the jungle lit by the strobe of muzzle flashes. It was chaos, pure and merciless. I wanted to run down that ridge, to throw myself into the fight, to do something, anything, to change what I'd set in motion. But Jenkins grabbed me, shoved me down into the brush. "You'll get us all killed," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "Stay alive. We need to report. That's our job now." His words felt like acid. Stay alive? While my brothers were dying below because of me? Every instinct screamed to fight, but I knew he was right. If we died too, the truth would never reach command. The ambush would be buried with us, so we stayed hidden. We listened, we endured. Hours felt like years as the firefight raged below. Every burst of gunfire was a reminder of what my arrogance had cost. Every scream was a wound I couldn't close. By nightfall, the valley was a graveyard. The jungle was silent again. Not the silence of waiting, but the silence of death. Smoke curled upward, mingling with the mist, carrying with it the stench of burned flesh and spent powder. When the NVA finally withdrew, we crept down into the valley. The sight broke me. Helmets lay scattered, rifles half buried in mud, bodies twisted in grotesque stillness. Men I'd laughed with, eaten with, trusted with my life, gone. And in that moment, the truth crushed me with a weight I've carried ever since. My bullet hadn't just killed an officer. It had killed my platoon. We gathered what intel we could, marking positions, counting bodies, but it didn't matter. No report could capture the truth of that valley. No debrief could weigh the cost. Those men were gone, and their blood was on my hands. Jenkins stayed close, silent, watchful. I think he understood what was eating me alive. He didn't speak it, but his eyes said enough. Blame was useless now. Survival was the only mission left. The trek back to extraction was brutal. Every sound in the jungle felt like a threat. Every rustle of leaves carried the promise of an ambush. The air pressed on us like a vice, thick and unrelenting. Miller and Vargas, those boys who'd once joked about home, about cars and girls, were silent now, buried in the valley. Their absence clung to us like ghosts. At night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment through my mind. The officer in my scope, Jenkins whispering, "Don't," and me ignoring him. I imagined what might have been if I'd listened. Maybe those men would have lived. Maybe they'd have written letters home, seen their children grow up, lived long, ordinary lives, but they didn't, because I squeezed that trigger. When we finally reached the extraction point, the helicopter's roar was like salvation and damnation all at once. We climbed aboard, and as the valley disappeared beneath us, I felt no relief, only the weight of what I carried. Back at base, the debrief was clinical: coordinates, enemy positions, estimated casualties. Command wanted the facts, stripped of emotion, but what I gave them was hollow. Numbers couldn't tell the story. Numbers couldn't scream like the men who died. Afterward, I sat alone, my rifle across my knees. I traced its lines with my fingers, the stock, the barrel, the scope that had betrayed me. Or maybe I betrayed it. Maybe I betrayed them all. I'd been trained to believe the rifle was an extension of myself, but that day it felt like a curse. Jenkins approached quietly, a shadow in the dim light. He didn't scold, didn't accuse. He just sat beside me. After a long silence, he said, "You're not the first to make a mistake out here, and you won't be the last." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him this wasn't just a mistake, it was murder by arrogance. But I stayed quiet. His words weren't forgiveness. They were survival, a way of saying carry it, but don't let it crush you. Still, it did crush me. Days turned into weeks, but the memory didn't fade. I'd see their faces in my sleep, hear their voices in the wind. I started writing their names in a notebook, every man from that platoon. A ritual maybe, or a penance. Every time my hand shook, I reminded myself, never again. Never let arrogance guide your hand. The war dragged on, as wars do. Missions blurred together, landscapes changed, men came and went. But the lesson remained, carved into my soul, deeper than any scar. One shot. That's all it took to unravel everything. Years later, when I finally left the Corps, I carried that valley with me. Civilians would ask if I'd ever killed someone. They expected bravado, stories of snipers picking off enemies at impossible distances. They wanted the Hollywood version. I'd just smile, shake my head, and change the subject. How could I tell them that the shot I was most proud of in the moment was the one that haunts me still? You see, the trigger doesn't just pull the bullet. It pulls the weight of consequences you'll carry for life. And sometimes the cost isn't just yours. It belongs to every man who trusted you. My one shot didn't make me a hero. It made me a reminder that skill without humility is a loaded weapon pointed at your own brothers. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see that ridge. I hear Jenkins whisper to, "Don't," and then I hear the gunshot. Always the gunshot. The valley burned for hours. Smoke clawed at the sky, choking out the sun. My ears rang with the thunder of mortars, the screams of men, the staccato rattle of AKs. Somewhere below, Vargas's voice cut through the static of the radio, high, panicked, desperate. "We're pinned. We can't move." They knew. They were waiting. He wasn't wrong. They were dug in, entrenched, prepared. My shot hadn't crippled them, it had triggered them. And my platoon was walking straight into the fire. I pressed the handset, tried to give corrections, tried to call down artillery. But the words tangled in my throat, my hands shook, because deep down I knew this wasn't a random ambush. It was my bullet, my decision, my arrogance. Through the scope, I saw the valley for what it was, a kill box, every ridgeline alive with muzzle flashes, every path choked with fire, men scrambling for cover that didn't exist. Then I saw Jenkins, my spotter, my brother in everything but blood. He was dragging one of the radio men, Miller, I think, through the mud, bullets snapping inches from his head. His voice carried up the slope. "Shaw, get on the net, call it in." I froze. The sniper who could calculate wind drift at 800 yards suddenly couldn't move a finger. The Marine who was supposed to be a ghost had become a liability. My chest tightened, breaths shallow. Shame tastes metallic. It sticks in your teeth, your tongue, your gut. But then Jenkins looked up at me just for a second. No fear in his eyes, just demand, just trust. And that broke whatever had me locked. I called it in. Coordinates, adjustments, fire for effect. Within minutes, the jungle shook under the weight of American artillery. Trees snapped like matchsticks. The earth convulsed. Explosions rolled down the valley like thunder made flesh. And in that chaos, the platoon found a gap. They pulled back, bloodied, broken, but alive. Most of them, anyway. Not all. Never all. When it was finally over, when the guns fell silent and the smoke thinned, the ridge felt like a grave. The air hung heavy with everything we'd lost. And I sat there, rifle across my lap. staring at the hands that had pulled the trigger, hands that had doomed brothers. They pulled us out 2 days later. Dust-off birds came whining through the valley, their rotors chopping the thick air, lifting what was left of us. The medics worked like machines, their hands stained red, their eyes hollow. I remember Jenkins sitting across from me in the chopper, his face streaked with mud and blood, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. The silence between us spoke louder than any curse he could have thrown my way. The flight back to the forward base felt like it lasted a lifetime. Men groaned beneath bloody bandages, some too far gone to even make a sound. I held my rifle across my knees, its metal still warm from the sun, and for the first time it didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a verdict. Back at the base, the smell of diesel and disinfectant clung to the air. Reports were filed, debriefs conducted. On paper, it was written up as an ambush, a hard-fought engagement where we'd held our ground and inflicted heavy casualties. The brass liked the numbers. They liked the story. They needed the illusion that we were winning. But stories on paper don't match the ones carved into your chest. I knew the truth. Jenkins knew the truth. Miller never got the chance to. Nights were the worst. I'd lay in my cot, the canvas creaking under every turn, and I'd see it again. The officer in my scope, the breath leaving my lungs, the trigger breaking. I'd hear the shot echo in my head, sharper than any thunder. And then I'd see Miller, wide-eyed and barely 19, falling into the mud. One decision, one moment, a lifetime chained to it. 3 days later, Jenkins finally spoke to me. He walked into the tent without ceremony, dropped a canteen at my feet, and sat down hard on the crate opposite me. His face looked older than it had a week before. War does that. It steals years and days. His voice was quiet but sharp. You killed him, Shaw. Miller's gone because of you. Don't hide from it. The words hit like shrapnel. I wanted to fight back, to argue that we were soldiers, that death was part of the ledger we all signed. I wanted to say Miller knew the risks, that we all did, but the words never came, because Jenkins was right. Miller wasn't gone because of war. He was gone because of me. So I nodded. I swallowed it whole, and from that day forward I carried it. Not as punishment, not as penance, but as reminder. War teaches you things schools never could. It strips you down to your rawest self, shows you the weight of arrogance, the cost of overconfidence, and it brands you so you never forget. For me, that brand was one shot, one perfect shot that ruined everything. But here's the thing about guilt. It doesn't just sit quietly. It festers, it whispers at night, it makes you second-guess every step, every decision. And out there, hesitation kills just as surely as arrogance. The next mission came fast. They didn't give us time to process, to heal. We were cogs in a machine, and the machine never stops. Orders came down. Another recon, another ridge, another valley. And my rifle came with me like an old friend I no longer trusted. Jenkins wouldn't even look at me when we geared up. He checked his equipment with mechanical precision, eyes never lifting. The space between us, once filled with trust and quiet understanding, was now a chasm. And I knew that chasm was my doing. Orders came down quick like they always did. No time for grief, no room for doubt. The war didn't care about what you carried inside. It only cared that you carried your pack, your rifle, and moved when told. The mission was another recon. Different ridge, different valley, but the same rules. Watch, report, do not engage. Ghost work. And this time, I swore to myself I would follow those rules to the letter. As we geared up, I could feel Jenkins's silence cutting through me sharper than any blade. He didn't look at me, didn't speak. His hands moved with mechanical precision as he checked the radio, adjusted his scope, tied down loose straps. For years we'd shared an unspoken bond, the kind where a glance replaced a sentence. But now, there was nothing, just cold distance. We moved out at dawn. The jungle was heavy with mist, each step sinking into wet soil. The air carried that sweet, rotting smell of vegetation mixed with cordite from battles long past. Every sound seemed amplified. The snap of a twig, the buzz of insects, the distant rumble of artillery miles away. I kept my eyes sharp, scanning every shadow, every tree line. My finger brushed the trigger guard from habit, but I reminded myself again and again, not this time. This time I was just a shadow, Hours passed in silence. Jenkins set the pace, Miller's absence a ghost that followed close behind. Vargas trailed with the radio, his young face drawn tight, too young for the lines worry had carved into him. When we reached the observation point, we dug in, concealed ourselves with foliage, checked fields of fire, mapped out escape routes. It was routine, but everything about it felt different. My rifle wasn't an extension of myself anymore, it was a weight, a reminder. We watched the trail below, the endless snake of supplies and soldiers threading through the valley. Trucks painted green and brown, men in faded uniforms, their rifles slung across weary shoulders. Just another day of war, just another convoy, but even routine has a way of turning. Near sundown, Jenkins tapped my shoulder, passing me the scope. His voice was low, flat. 3 o'clock, ridge opposite, I scanned. At first, nothing. Then I saw them. 2 figures moving slow, careful, too careful. They weren't patrolling, they were searching. Scouts NVA reconnaissance, likely sweeping the ridge for signs of us. My breath caught. The old instinct surged. Scope up, settle in, take the shot. But I forced myself still. Orders were clear, no engagement unless fired upon. Jenkins's eyes burned into me as if he knew exactly what was running through my head. His voice sharp as broken glass. Not again, Shaw. We wait. We stay ghosts. I gave a single nod. My heart hammered, but I didn't move. The scouts lingered, scanning the ridge. One bent down, fingers brushing a fresh boot print we hadn't covered. My boot print. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Jenkins's hand gripped my arm, steady but hard. His whisper was fierce. Hold. Do not move. The scout raised his rifle, scanning the trees. For one breathless moment, his gaze passed right over us. I felt my finger twitch on the trigger, the urge screaming through me, but I didn't fire. I held. After what felt like hours, the scouts moved on, disappearing into the jungle shadows. The danger passed. We were still unseen. Jenkins finally released my arm, his jaw tight. For the first time since the valley, he spoke to me with something other than anger. That's how we survive. His words cut deep, not because they condemned me, but because they carried something else. Relief, maybe even the first spark of trust finding its way back. That night, as I lay in the damp earth, staring at the canopy above, I understood something I hadn't before. Strength wasn't in pulling the trigger. It was in knowing when not to. And that lesson came at the cost of a 19-year-old kid named Miller. Years later, the battlefield still lived inside me. Not in the medals or the paperwork that cleared my name. Those were just ink and metal. What stayed were the faces. Riley, Chen, the wounded who limped through the rest of their lives because of my choice. I carried them everywhere. Into airports where protesters screamed and spat. Into quiet hometown streets that felt foreign after the jungle. Into a marriage that couldn't survive the nightmares I refused to speak about. Into the silence of my children's questions when all I could give them was distance. The Corps trained me to shoot, to observe, to endure. They never trained me to live with memory. For decades, I thought silence was strength. If I didn't talk about it, if I buried it deep enough, maybe it would stop echoing. But silence doesn't smother guilt. It feeds it. It grows in the dark. The turning point came not on a battlefield, but in a dusty VFW hall years later. I walked in because I was tired of drinking alone, tired of carrying it by myself. The room was filled with old warriors, men who looked like me. Gray hair, lined faces, eyes that had seen too much. At first I just listened. Story after story spilled out about ambushes gone wrong, patrols that ended in chaos, decisions that haunted them. And I realized something that stunned me. Every single man carried a ridgeline of his own. A valley where arrogance, fear, or a split-second choice cost lives. One night my turn came. My throat locked. My chest felt like it was caving in. But I forced myself to speak. I said the names, Riley and Chen. I told them about the ridge, about the officer in the white pajamas, about the silence after my rifle cracked. I spoke the words I had swallowed for decades, and when I finished, the room didn't fall silent with judgment. No one turned away. Instead, they nodded, quiet, solemn nods. Then one by one, they began to share their own failures, their own regrets, their own one shot. It hit me like a revelation. I wasn't alone. The weight I carried wasn't mine alone. It was a burden we all shared, different details, same cost. That realization didn't erase the guilt. It didn't bring Riley or Chen back. But it transformed the silence. It wasn't a prison anymore. It became a bond. I learned that telling the story wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about making excuses. It was about acknowledging, honoring the dead by speaking their names, honoring the living by admitting the truth. Now, when I sit in front of a microphone like this, when I share this story with you, it isn't for glory. It isn't to paint myself as a hero. It's to remind you and remind myself that mistakes don't have to define us forever. Maybe you've never held a rifle. Maybe your battlefield looks nothing like mine. But we all have a moment we wish we could take back, a choice that rippled further than we imagined. If you carry that weight, listen carefully. You are not alone. The silence is lying to you. Others carry their own scars, their own echoes, their own one shot. And here's what I've learned after half a century of living with mine. The measure of a life isn't the mistake. It's what you do after, whether you let it hollow you out or whether you let it teach you the sacredness of choice. I still wake up some nights hearing the crack of that rifle. I still see the valley erupting in fire. But now, instead of drowning in it, I let it remind me. Remind me of the responsibility we have to each other, to the ones who stand beside us, to the ones who trust us. I tell my story because maybe there's someone listening tonight who needs to hear this. Someone carrying their own unbearable silence. Maybe you. And if that's you, I'll tell you what no manual, no training, no drill sergeant ever told me. You don't have to carry it alone. Years later, the battlefield still lived inside me. Not in the medals or the paperwork that cleared my name. Those were just ink and metal. What stayed were the faces. Riley, Chen, the wounded who limped through the rest of their lives because of my choice. I carried them everywhere. Into airports where protesters screamed and spat. Into quiet hometown streets that felt foreign after the jungle. Into a marriage that couldn't survive the nightmares I refused to speak about. Into the silence of my children's questions when all I could give them was distance. The Corps trained me to shoot, to observe, to endure. They never trained me to live with memory. For decades, I thought silence was strength. If I didn't talk about it, if I buried it deep enough, maybe it would stop echoing. But silence doesn't smother guilt. It feeds it. It grows in the dark. The turning point came not on a battlefield, but in a dusty VFW hall years later. I walked in because I was tired of drinking alone, tired of carrying it by myself. The room was filled with old warriors, men who looked like me, gray hair, lined faces, eyes that had seen too much. At first I just listened. Story after story spilled out about ambushes gone wrong, patrols that ended in chaos, decisions that haunted them. And I realized something that stunned me. Every single man carried a ridgeline of his own, a valley where arrogance, fear, or a split-second choice cost lives. One night my turn came. My throat locked. My chest felt like it was caving in. But I forced myself to speak. I said the names, Riley and Chen. I told them about the ridge, about the officer in the white pajamas, about the silence after my rifle cracked. I spoke the words I had swallowed for decades, and when I finished, the room didn't fall silent with judgment. No one turned away. Instead, they nodded, quiet, solemn nods. Then one by one, they began to share their own failures, their own regrets, their own one shot. It hit me like a revelation. I wasn't alone. The weight I carried wasn't mine alone. It was a burden we all shared, different details, same cost. That realization didn't erase the guilt. It didn't bring Riley or Chen back, but it transformed the silence. It wasn't a prison anymore. It became a bond. I learned that telling the story wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about making excuses. It was about acknowledging, honoring the dead by speaking their names, honoring the living by admitting the truth. Now, when I sit in front of a microphone like this, when I share this story with you, it isn't for glory. It isn't to paint myself as a hero. It's to remind you and remind myself that mistakes don't have to define us forever. Maybe you've never held a rifle. Maybe your battlefield looks nothing like mine. But we all have a moment we wish we could take back. A choice that rippled further than we imagined. If you carry that weight, listen carefully. You are not alone. The silence is lying to you. Others carry their own scars, their own echoes, their own one shot. And here's what I've learned after half a century of living with mine. The measure of a life isn't the mistake. It's what you do after, whether you let it hollow you out or whether you let it teach you the sacredness of choice. I still wake up some nights hearing the crack of that rifle. I still see the valley erupting in fire. But now, instead of drowning in it, I let it remind me. Remind me of the responsibility we have to each other, to the ones who stand beside us, to the ones who trust us. I tell my story because maybe there's someone listening tonight who needs to hear this. Someone carrying their own unbearable silence. Maybe you. And if that's you, I'll tell you what no manual, no training, no drill sergeant ever told me. You don't have to carry it alone.